What did 8 top bosses see during their 3-day trip to China? Don't underestimate China, and don't underestimate the determination of the Chinese people. Not long ago, a major event occurred that caused the entire Western venture capital community to collectively break down. 8 top venture capitalists from Europe and the US, checkbooks in hand, enthusiastically traveled to China for an on-site inspection. The result? Not only did they barely invest in any projects, but they collaboratively issued a non-investable list. Don't misunderstand. This isn't to say China is uninvestable, but rather, they bluntly told their Western peers, in these sectors, game over. Stop wasting money competing with China. You are doomed to fail. This makes one wonder, how did Western capital, which has always held itself in high regard, go to China once and completely lose its mindset? These big shots initially came with the attitude of finding flaws. They thought, isn't Chinese manufacturing just about having lots of people, low wages, and maybe those questionable sweatshops? But when they arrived at the first stop, CATL, Contemporary Amperex Technology Company Limited, everyone's jaws dropped. They expected to see thousands of workers screwing components on assembly lines. Instead, they saw the legendary dark factory, a huge workshop where not a single person was visible. 12 production lines were furiously operated entirely by robots. They worked perfectly with the lights off, achieving precision higher than a Swiss watch. This wasn't a factory. This was a sci-fi movie set. If the substitution of robots for humans was merely shocking, what followed was outright humiliation. When inquiring about R&D speed, a Chinese engineer apologized, saying with an embarrassed look, "China is too slow. It takes 3 days to improve a turbine blade and 1 month to produce a new solar module." The faces of the Western bosses turned green. They knew the same work in the West would take half a month to modify a blade and at least 5 years to develop a new module. This precise style answer shattered their perception. China not only has scale but also a light-speed evolution that leaves the West far behind. What desperate truths did these 8 magnates see during their 3-day trip to China? Why is Chinese manufacturing now called the hexagonal warrior? Next, we will peel back the layers of this industrial miracle that brought despair to the West. 1. From human wave tactics to dark factories, the West is stuck in last century's fantasy. We must admit that for decades, the West's impression of China has been fixated on human wave tactics. They thought Chinese manufacturing was cheap because Chinese workers were paid little. Before these 8 VCs arrived, they were confidently calculating, as soon as China pursues automation, or moves factories to Vietnam and India to utilize cheaper labor, we can leave China far behind in minutes. The result? Reality delivered a resounding slap in the face. At CATL, they witnessed a complete revolution in productivity. 12 fully automated production lines, with robotic arms flying up and down, require almost no human intervention from raw material feeding to finished product. What does this mean? It means the concept of labor cost has been virtually erased by China in the high-end manufacturing sector. No matter how cheap labor is in India, can it be cheaper than robots that don't need to eat, don't get paid, and run 24 hours a day? What suffocated the Western bosses even more was that this intelligence was not just about a few machines. It was a dimensional reduction attack by the entire system. While factories in Europe and the US are still haggling with unions and dealing with the headaches of scheduling 3 shifts, Chinese factories have evolved into tireless steel behemoths. This generational gap in efficiency cannot be solved by raising or lowering workers' wages. It is a difference in the level of industrial civilization itself. 2. The Versailles critical hit. Your 5 years is China's 1 month. The most dramatic scene of this inspection occurred at Shanghai Mufan Power and Kunshan Heizing Optoelectronics, when Chinese technicians spoke with slight embarrassment about improving the curved surface in 3 days and new product development in 1 month. The air must have frozen. This is not just a matter of speed, it is a total mockery of the Western R&D system. In Europe and the US, if you want a sample of a turbine blade, the process is drawing the design, emailing it to the supplier, waiting for the supplier's schedule, needing cross-border logistics due to an incomplete supply chain, and having several rounds of negotiation meetings in between. You're lucky to see the part in 2 weeks. In China, drawings are made upstairs, the workshop directly opens the mold downstairs, and the raw materials factory is just a left turn away. Taking 3 days is considered slow. Even more outrageous was the solar module development. Western bosses asked about the R&D cycle, hoping for some psychological comfort, only to be told, from lab to mass production, it only takes 1 or 2 months. To iterate at this level in Europe and the US requires documentation, funding applications, finding matching suppliers, and trial and error, taking at least 3 to 5 years. When the Chinese employee said, "It's indeed slow," he was absolutely not faking it, because in China's brutally competitive market, being 1 step slow is death. This extreme efficiency, driven by market pressure, brought a deep sense of powerlessness to Western capitalists accustomed to sipping coffee and discussing vision. 3. Data doesn't lie. China is the hexagonal warrior, without weaknesses. If you don't look at the data, you might think the word despair is too strong. But when you raise your perspective and look at the global industrial map, you realize it's not just despair, it's suffocating. Now, 80% of the world's solar panels, 60% of the wind turbines, 70% of the electric vehicles, and 75% of the batteries are stamped made in China. This is not just a lead in a single product, it is full chain monopoly. China used to be criticized for being large but not strong. Now, on Nature magazine's annual list, China accounts for 8 of the world's top 10 research institutions. The famous report by the Australian Strategic Policy Institute, ASPI, stated that out of 44 key technologies, China leads the US in 37, even running ahead in core fields like national defense, energy, and artificial intelligence. The reason these 8 VCs compiled the Non-Investable List is that they saw one clear fact: in green energy and advanced manufacturing, China has become the hexagonal warrior, number 1 in global scale, globally leading in technology, lowest global cost, and the most complete global supply chain. You want to fight China in these areas? How? Your technology is not as good, you manufacture slower than me, and you sell it 10 times more expensively. This is not competition, this is suicide. 4. The magic of the 1-hour industrial circle. Why is decoupling a false proposition? Finally, we must discuss the issue that gives Western politicians the biggest headaches. Why, after so many years of shouting for decoupling and de-risking, does the relationship get tighter? The secret lies in China's 1-hour industrial circle. This inspection allowed the tycoons to understand why so many places in the world have cheaper labor than China but still cannot become the world's factory. The reason is that in the Yangtze River Delta and Pearl River Delta, when you open a factory, every screw, chip, mold, packaging material, and even the person delivering your takeout is within a 1-hour driving radius. Here is the most telling example. A batch of high-spec solar panels would take a Western factory about 3 months to deliver and cost $5,000 due to fragmented supply chains and high logistics costs. A Chinese factory, with upstream and downstream right next door, only needs 1 phone call for materials to arrive, delivering in 3 to 7 days, with a quote of just $500. If you are the buyer, who do you choose? This is not a matter of patriotism. This is a matter of commercial law. So, why do Western countries shout loudly but act honestly? Because they genuinely cannot leave. Want to replace China? Fine, but you must first rebuild a complete, efficient, and cheap industrial system in your own country, which requires at least decades and trillions in investment. For Western capital, which seeks short-term profits, this is fundamentally impossible. 5. A tribute to every striver. This is the foundation of a great nation's rise. Writing this, I must speak from the heart. The despair of these 8 magnates is the hope that generations of Chinese people bought with sheer effort and sacrifice. Today's dark factories did not fall from the sky, and today's China speed was not handed out for free. This journey began when the nation was poor, blank, and blockaded, it continued with hundreds of millions of migrant workers tirelessly working day and night, and it was forged by countless engineers burning the midnight oil in labs. Every step was hard-won. The West sees cold machines and data, but what China sees is the sweat and tears of countless ordinary Chinese people. It is because so many people were willing to fight for a better life, and so many companies were willing to fight to the death for even a 1% increase in efficiency, that we have today's industrial behemoth that makes the West despair. The strength of Chinese manufacturing is not just because the machines are excellent, but because the people on this land are the most diligent, the most resilient, and the most unwilling to admit defeat. Don't underestimate China, and don't underestimate the determination of the Chinese people. That non-investable list, a sigh of despair in the eyes of Westerners, is the highest medal of honor for the Chinese people. It proves that the path China has taken is the right one, and that hard work invigorates the nation is not an empty slogan. However, China must remain sober. The West will not give up easily, and technological competition will only become more brutal. But as long as China maintains this reverence for technology and keeps this deeply ingrained drive to strive, no matter how many lists they issue or technologies they blockade, the final winner will certainly be China. Friends, do you think Western countries still have a chance to surpass China in manufacturing? Or do you have examples around you where you have felt the dimensional reduction attack of Chinese manufacturing?